Yes, well, we have people here from these new initiatives that are the leaders of these new initiatives, so it's going to be an interesting conversation. So, hi, Francisco. Dakota, nice meeting you. Cynthia, the rest. Hey. Yes, please. So, well, we're going to talk about what you're proposing, and I'm going to start with Dakota. Hey, Dakota Gruener, founder and CEO of Reflective. What can you tell us about Reflective?
Sure. Is this mic working?
If the
Okay, cool. So, hi everyone, I'm Dakota. I lead Reflective. We're a nonprofit, independent, philanthropically funded initiative designed to radically accelerate research in SRM, and specifically in SAI, so that the world is equipped with the data and tools that we think will be necessary for informed decision making fast enough to matter. Broadly, we focus on three things. The first is that we think that having a very methodical roadmap for what research really is most urgent, and publishing that openly, gathering feedback on it, making sure that that is a collaborative and living document, not only helps then to identify what research we prioritize for funding, but also can help provide insight for other funders, particularly public funders who are thinking about what research programs they might want to support and lead. So that's the first piece. The second is pooling philanthropic funding and then distributing that to vetted priority projects. And I'll get back to that in a little bit. Broadly, both of those we kind of bucket into the data side of things. And then the third is around building tools like our simulator that we believe can help accelerate the research. We're a small interdisciplinary team, 7 people full-time, 7 people part-time. We partner with organizations like Degrees and are really eager to continue to build lots of partnerships across the ecosystem. And we list all of our funders on our website in case anyone's interested to understand who is behind it, very much in spirit with the sort of calls around transparency.
So if we go to your website, we find this statement. You want to accelerate research fast enough to matter. What do you exactly mean by that?
Sure. So first thing I should say is that we are agnostic to whether SRM should ultimately be deployed. If science says it's a bad idea, we would celebrate having clarity on that outcome. But we think that there will be demand for data around the safety and efficacy of SRM very quickly. And the thing that I think worries me and keeps me up at night is a situation where those decisions are being made in the dark. So we need answers not someday, but soon on sort of some of these key questions around safety and efficacy. And I think in particular trying to make sure that those answers are generated while there's time for sort of rigorous debate rather than flash in the pan decisions. And I think just maybe to belabor the point I already said, we think that there's not infinite time and there's not infinite money. And so that necessitates a question, sort of what are the first things first, and really focusing on what are the largest and most consequential sources of uncertainty. What are these uncertainties that actually would move the needle in terms of decision-relevant outcomes for people and for ecosystems? And then what is the kind of modeling or experiments, engineering work that would be required to reduce or resolve those? And then finally, how do we build tools or infrastructure that helps the entire field get to those answers even faster?
So what have you done until now, and what's on the roadmap? What's coming?
Yeah, so things that we've done, we released a openly accessible simulator. It's available on our website. We've got a booth here where the poster sessions are going if people want to play around with it. That was really designed to help policymakers and journalists, lay audiences explore what the both global and local impacts of a potential SAI deployment could look like. We are just about to release V1.2, and if people come over to the booth, you will get a chance to play with it even before it's fully live, which allows you to look at variable injection strategies, so high latitude deployment or unilateral deployment scenarios. Really excited about that. Our scientific advisory board has done work to do an uncertainty assessment, so this question of what are the largest and most consequential sources of uncertainty. And then we held a workshop last year that I think feeds into some of the conversations here today around IP, and sort of what are the as we see the potential for commercial entrance in the space, what are sort of the key considerations there? Just a few of the things on the roadmap. We have an RFP that's live on our website at the moment. Would encourage people to go and check it out around the impacts and trade-offs of a high latitude deployment scenario. We have a cloud hub that we are developing and releasing, designed and populated with pre-processed data and with computing, cloud computing behind it, so that it is easier to do some of the simulations, and specifically for the RFP, trying to ensure that all of the kind of necessary runs that you would need are already in there, again, to make that easier. And then we are working on an uncertainty database that tries to take everything in that uncertainty assessment and really flesh it out a lot further. The RFP is the first of many to come, so stay tuned.
Thank you very much, Dakota. So we go now to Cynthia Scharf, Senior Fellow from the Center for Future Generations. What's with the name? What do you mean by that? And yeah, what's the mission of this initiative? Kind of.
Yeah, this still can't. Okay. The Center for Future Generations is a relatively new think tank in Brussels. To be clear, it was funded by a tech billionaire, a Dutch gentleman, but I think it's fair to say his founding ethos is quite different than what you might suspect the label tech billionaire to mean. It's very much in the spirit of the European Union and a precautionary approach. The idea is to anticipate and find ways to better govern emerging global technologies. And climate interventions is only one of 5 technologies that the think tank looks at. By far and away, the largest one is advanced AI. Then there's a program on quantum, on neurotech, and biotech. And then Matthias and I work on the climate intervention side of things. We have 2 other staff, so we're very small at the moment. But we really see our mission as trying to bring responsible conversation, opening up responsible conversation in the European Union on research, the need for more publicly funded research in specific, and at the same time, and I think Sven alluded to this, how do we provide some kind of reassurance to the public, to governments, that we aren't going down that famed slippery slope. So finding ways to hold that conversation in balance. We have a few other ideas about how we improve transparency, how we might build out on monitoring to a regional and perhaps larger scale, but looking at those kind of practical measures.
Okay. Yeah, and what are you doing on climate interventions? What exactly are you doing there? And what is different from all the other approaches that are out there?
We're different because we're really the only game in town.
Okay.
In Brussels, there's no other think tank or NGO or non-state actor that has any dedicated capacity of even 1 full-time person on SRM. So for now, we're really trying to build out our program and strengthen that capacity, because to put it kind of simply, we want to see the European Union be the responsible adult in the room on this conversation, when so much volatility and wackiness is coming from, the other side of the Atlantic.
Places.
Yeah, so that's the focus at present. We have some practical steps, as I mentioned, on monitoring in specific. Our approach, we really try to listen and learn, as I said before, not go in with a set brief of here's what you need to know when we speak with policymakers, but really listening to what their concerns are, letting them kind of guide that conversation, and then bringing back to them a variety of responses that we gather from different research communities. So there's not necessarily one point to the truth. There can be a range of responses to those kinds of things.
Okay. So how you go about that, and what are the main challenges you face in these discussions?
The main challenge is primarily moral hazard. There's a great discomfort in having this conversation. Behind closed doors, I think most governments are coming to the realization that we are quite in a crisis and not sure where we go next and what to do, should they even have this conversation. Yeah. But the conversation itself is starting to happen. But translating that out into more specific, concrete steps in the public sphere is where we're at right now. It's really quite difficult. And I think an important piece of this is building demand from the public for answers. politicians pay attention when their constituents want something.
Yes.
So engaging with the public, bringing the conversations in, bringing in more surround sound. We spend a lot of time talking to other actors in Brussels right now who are not working on this and trying to bring them into the conversation, whatever their perspective may be. We don't have a perspective, this is good, this is bad, ban it or use it. It's get in the conversation now so you can be part of the discussion on how to govern this.
Okay. Well, and what can you tell us about the ARIA grant you received? How's that going?
Well, we just received it. Thank you, Mark. We're very excited about the partners we have. So this is a collaborative effort. We're working with a researcher in the University of Leeds who's looking at geopolitical dynamics. I should just frame it by saying we're looking at potential scenarios for deployment in 2035, how we get there, and more importantly, what might we learn by looking at that and then backcasting to say, what are some of the risk reduction measures? What are some of the governance mechanisms? What are some pieces of research that we wish we had before we got to that stage? What data is missing? What might de-escalate a crisis? Another part of this could be, are we looking at misinformation, disinformation? How do we deal with that aspect of things? So we're working with a variety of partners to tackle those different pieces of it. We're very lucky to have someone who formerly worked in the Foresight unit of OECD, Ms. Trish Lavery, sitting right over there. She's working with us. And we're working with the OECD as our partner. And they will be then taking the scenarios we develop and looking at what kind of governance options might be created around that. And they will really be owning that piece of it.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. And well, we go now to Matthias Honegger, project lead of Co-Create. What is the Co-Create project and what's the team going to do? What are the objectives?
Yeah, first of all, good morning, and it's good to see so many of you show up despite very generous servings of wine. We're really being treated well here. I'll speak here in this chair as with my affiliation as Senior Research Associate at Perspectives Climate Research, a climate consultancy and a research branch thereof. And two of my colleagues are also at this conference, Axel Michael and François Pougel. And Cynthia already mentioned I have this other affiliation with CFG. But so more on the project, on Co-Create, which Perspectives is leading. What it means is essentially it explores the conditions for responsible research through analyses, co-creation, and ethos. So that's some big words, some ominous words. But in practical terms, the project seeks to support, at the request of the European Commission, on the question what might constitute responsible research. And it's not a technical question per se, right? There's many different aspects to this, risk of different kinds, including physical risks, political risks, ethical concerns, all that plays a part in this question. And so it's a very multifaceted project. It seeks to explore various avenues, and then we are going to be trying our best to tie those together into a coherent picture of, what could this look like if responsible research is to be done. It's a pretty large consortium of 12 organizations spread around Europe. And everyone brings their own expertise to this question. It's a 3-year project also. And it's not technically a research project, but a coordination and support action. And the 3 years, well, we're actually already halfway through. So we've delivered some of the outputs, but much more is yet to come. So,
okay, and how about how about getting money from the EU? Is there enough financing for these initiatives?
So if we're talking about SRM research, then, well, the answer is actually so far there's almost no EU-funded SRM research, if interpreted to mean mission-driven research into answering specific questions around the feasibility, risks, shortcomings, or potentials of SRM. That comes with 3 caveats. There is, or there has been, funding from individual member states in the European Union. There is basic climate science, which does contribute to our understanding of SRM. And thirdly, there is another project currently funded by the European Union, which is the GENIE project, looking at literatures and conducting surveys, which has produced a large number, a very impressive number of publications so far.
Thank you very much, Matthias. And now we go to Mark Symes, sorry, Program Director from ARIA. What can you tell us about ARIA? How's your program extending research funding?
Thank you. Hello, good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be here. My name's Mark Symes. I'm a Program Director at ARIA. ARIA is the Advanced Research and Invention Agency, and we were founded in early 2023. We are a government funder, so we're backed by the UK taxpayer ultimately, and we were set up with a mission to fund research into areas that could be enormously consequential for humanity, but that are also rather intractable. And so the program I'm leading is called Exploring Climate Cooling, and it's motivated around climate tipping points. These are discontinuities in the climate trajectory, which could lead to events such as the melting of large ice sheets or the shutting off of ocean circulations, which would have major implications for all of us. Now, most of the tipping points that we might encounter in the coming decades or century are induced by high temperatures globally. So therefore, we know already what we need to do to reduce the probability of encountering them. We need to decarbonize. But yet the current trajectory that we're on puts us at risk of triggering a number of potential tipping points before decarbonization has had a chance to take effect. And this has led increasingly to proposals for ways to cool the Earth or the climate down faster than might be achieved by decarbonization. In other words, SRM. Now, as this forum has highlighted, there are a number of approaches for this, but really their efficiency or their efficacy, in some cases whether they would work at all, there are a number of open questions around that, as well as around what the impacts or effects of these would be or their governability. So the program that I'm leading is aiming to do fundamental research that will try and address some of the critical unanswered questions across those pieces. So we'll be funding modeling to that extent and indoor experiments. We'll also be funding work around the governability and the societal aspects of these potential approaches. But critically, we will also, under certain circumstances, be funding a small number of very small, controlled outdoor experiments to gain critical information as to the real-world physical effects that some of these approaches might have and their feasibility. We've got a number of rules around how we're going to fund those, particularly around the size and scale of experiments, and also the kind of engagement and co-design we'll require of the teams that are doing those before those experiments can take place. So we announced the awardees of the project just last week, so we'll be funding 21 projects with PIs based in 12 different countries, and a number of those are here today at the forum, and I think a number of them will be presenting in the poster session immediately after I've finished talking. So please do go around and speak to them. And of course, myself and my team, Mike and George, will be here as well until the end of the forum. So please do come and speak to us if you have any questions.
Yeah, and one very important thing of your initiative is this global approach, no? And trying to get a lot of people from everywhere around the world working together. What can you tell us about why did you are looking for this collaboration and this global perspective?
So very simply, climate tipping points, if they occurred, would affect us.
We're doomed.
And to that extent, it's important that we have voices from across sectors, from across communities, and from across nations around the world that are informed and can talk about those. And it's also, it was important to us at ARIA to spread research capacity so that all voices are empowered to enter into that conversation. And so that's why we're funding really very internationally through this call.
Well, being a researcher, I have to ask, how do we can apply or do something about it? How can we be part of this?
Well, sadly, for the first call, you missed it.
So, I knew it.
But I'll say two things. Firstly, I really would encourage you to talk to the folks that we're funding here. We're trying to build basically a broad community, which we hope will include everyone in this room as we address these questions and work together to work out how we can do this research responsibly. And so we'll need you looking in from the inside, even if, from the outside, even if you don't have funding from us, to try and hold us to account around that and to offer us advice. Secondly, all is not lost in terms of direct funding, because we will be releasing soon our seed funding call. Okay. That will probably go live in June. Again, we will be funding internationally. The requirements for that seed funding are a bit different to the main program, so the amount you can receive is restricted to £500,000 UK. And we're looking in those projects for very speculative ideas that are anchored in the opportunity space, the very broad framing that we look at. We will be funding internationally. I will say, though, it will probably be to your advantage if you're not based in the UK, if you have a UK collaborator to help you with that.
Okay. And one of the things that, well, it's very difficult, as we have been discussing in the previous session, you're talking about doing outdoor experiments. It is quite a thorny issue, so how do you navigate this and make it possible to kind of explore that possibility of doing outdoor experiments?
I'd say this was a key decision for us in developing the program, which has actually been in development now for about 18 months. We identified that there were particular instances in which progress in the field could only be made through collecting outdoor data, so collecting real data from outdoor experiments. This is a contentious issue. We've tried to learn from examples of experiments that have been cancelled in the past, as well as experiments that have been successful and have been able to proceed, in thinking around not just the technical requirements that we'll put on teams, but also requirements around how they engage and the transparency with which they operate. And so we will be, for example, putting in restrictions around the physical size that experiments can have, the magnitude of the perturbation that they're trying to bring about, how long they could last for. They have to be reversible, and we won't be allowing our teams to release any toxic materials to the environment during these experiments. We then also have requirements around how those teams will have to engage with key communities near where their experiments are taking place, for example. An explicit requirement that there's co-design and that the experiments have some sort of environmental impact assessment that's performed before the experiment takes place, that's available for the community to see and feedback on. And we're hoping to do all this as transparently as possible, as you would hope and expect from a public funder.
Yeah. And, well, a related kind of problematic issue is for-profit SRM activities. How do you go about, for example, with intellectual property and commercialization?
So we've really tried to strike a balance as far as we can, noting that there are a lot of challenging and maybe ethical concerns around having private actors in this space. From the point of view of IP, we're pretty clear that, as you would expect of a public funder, that any data that's collected from the research that we fund is made available, open access for everyone to see. We've also tried to strike a balance in how we think around the pathway to commercialization, and particularly around patenting. And we are at the moment establishing what we call the patent pledge, which is based in large part on work that was performed by Jesse Reynolds and George Contreras around their ideas for pledging in this space. So we will be allowing teams to file for patents from work that we've funded. We'll be putting some restrictions around how they can commercialize that research, but most importantly, we'll be inviting the people, or enforcing on the people that sign that pledge, that they make their patents available for research purposes at no cost to the community, so that we at least keep the research space open for as long as we can.
Okay. And what can you tell us about the projects that are ongoing? Where are they located, and what kind of issues they're looking at in particular?
So we'll be funding 7 projects that look at modeling and 5 projects that look at the societal aspects of SRM, all with sort of some boundaries, some grainy boundaries between them. We'll be funding 4 projects that are looking at monitoring of ongoing atmospheric processes, and we'll be funding these 5 outdoor experiments. The 5 outdoor experiments will be taking place across the UK, the US, Canada, and Australia. Within those 5 outdoor experiments, 3 will be based around marine cloud brightening. So one of those will be on the Barrier Reef, where we'll be funding the Southern Cross team through Daniel Harrison. One will be somewhere in the UK, led by University of Manchester, and another one will be somewhere else in the UK, looking at cloud brightening using charge, will be led by the University of Reading. We'll be funding an ice sheet thickening project led by University of Cambridge in collaboration with Real Ice and Arctic Reflections. That'll be taking place in northern Canada. And finally, we'll be conducting one study, which is a collaboration between University of Cambridge and Harvard, that looks at the aging of materials under stratospheric conditions. So we won't be releasing any materials to the stratosphere when we do this. The experiment will be entirely contained inside a weather balloon, but we will therefore be able to bring the stratosphere to the samples, as it were, and to see how alternatives to SO2 behave under stratospheric conditions in a controlled way.
Thank you very much, Mark, and thank you to everyone. We'll be looking forward for more news about your initiatives. And just to close, thank you very, very much to everyone who's been here, and we'll be back at 3:45 p.m. for the closing town hall. And, well, as you know, this is the last day of the Degrees Global Forum. But tomorrow we still have one session about GeoMIP, so you're also welcome. Thank you very much.